Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are really glad you could join us today for this performance series webinar, where we will cover a topic relating to the business of orthodontics. So, this is a new series that we have just started this year, and the format will be that we will enlist some of the industry's brightest orthodontists to share some pearls of wisdom based on their learnings throughout their own practice journey. Now, before we get started, just a quick housekeeping note. If you do have questions throughout this session, please drop them into the Q&A panel and not the chat. So just make sure you're adding those to Q&A. Our team will be monitoring those throughout the night, and we will try to leave time at the end to address as many as we can, but this is a very packed webinar. Now, I'm excited to jump right in to introducing today's speaker, Dr. Jeremy Lustig. Dr. Lustig is not only a highly respected orthodontist, but also a true operator and entrepreneur in our space. He's been a longtime OrthoFi customer, first in his individual practice and later as a co-founder of 5 Points Dental, where he and his partner have built a thriving multi-location group practice. Now, what makes Jeremy especially valuable as a speaker is that he's lived through the exact challenges so many practices are facing today, especially when it comes to staffing. He's had to rethink how to build support and scale a team in a constantly shifting environment. And he's built his organization with a strong focus on alignment, accountability, and growth. Now, in today's session, Dr. Lustig will share how he's approached building a mission-aligned team and how combining the right people with the right technology and strategic outsourcing has allowed his organization to drive both significant growth and operational efficiency. After walking through those lessons, those broader lessons, we will then drill down to see his real-world example, sharing specific data from his own practice, including how OrthoFi has supported that growth and provided additional clarity into his performance along the way. So our goal is that you walk away from tonight with ideas you can implement to improve your own journey. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Lustig. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for the introduction, Marla. I really appreciate it, and certainly I'm undeserving. So thank you very much. And I want to thank everyone here. Let me see if I can share my screen really quick and we can jump in. Hope everyone's able to see that. Well, thank you all for joining this evening. I know it's late for some of you on the East Coast, and do appreciate you joining. I appreciate OrthoFi also for giving me this opportunity. So as Marla mentioned, tonight I wanted to talk to everyone about something that I believe most every orthodontist, is talking about. I know that when I talk to them, we talk about the goods and the bads. When we talk about the difficulty, the term staffing comes up around every corner. And it's not just hiring, and it's not just the turnover that we experience, but it's also just the daily reality of trying to deliver excellent care, grow our practices, and still have a life outside of the office. And it seems like this topic is a constant, ever-changing thing that we have to deal with. Staffing to me feels like a very unpredictable part of running a practice. And it's because we don't have full control of staffing in general. We're dealing with more than one personality. We can control our clinical systems and have incredibly strong clinical systems. We can have great technology in the office, and especially with the advent of all the digital workflows or the advent of AI and how that is now entering into our profession. We can also have an incredibly full schedule, more patients than we know what to do with. But the fact is, if our team structure is not working, our entire practice can feel heavier than it really should. Our reality is orthodontics has changed dramatically over the last decade, and I believe, as we're watching, is changing over the next years, just 1-2 years, it's changing dramatically. In many ways, we can structure our teams. We can structure them in so many different roles. We can continue to work on our workflows, but we just are not keeping up with the change. So the goal of today, when Marla asked me if I would speak, would be to share some of the lessons I've learned during my 25 years of practice. And this will include the systems that we redesigned. It's going to talk about some of how our organization grew from just an office to a few offices to a much larger company than that. And what I hope you leave with today is a different way to think about staffing. In many cases, what looks like a people problem is actually our problem. It's a design problem. The good news there is that there's something that we can do about it. So, oops, sorry about that. So, when we talk about the staffing environment and how greatly it has changed, I think it's important that we look at honestly where we are today. When I talk to orthodontists across the country, themes that they talk about are remarkably consistent. And I'll give you some statistics that back that. It's a lot harder to find good team members. This is what people say. Here's the concerning fact. Did you know that over 50% of orthodontists report significant staffing challenges? Over half of us are concerned about this. We're concerned about high turnover. We're concerned about talent shortage. We're concerned about the rising compensation. And all of these things are happening within a relatively small industry. And I know that the old adage, misery loves company. So I'll make you feel a little better. So we don't feel alone. You should know that this climbs to over 70% if you consider dentistry as a whole. So 70% of dentistry is concerned with staffing. Another common thing that is stated in our profession of orthodontics is that our training, it just takes longer. And it's a lot harder than it used to be. We're busy in the clinic seeing patients. Yet now we have more training to do. As I previously mentioned, the talent pool, the people that we can bring into our practices is far less than it used to be. We have to train individuals for many more hours. It's hard to find somebody, or it's rare that we come across a new hire that has really broad history in the industry. Very few super seasoned assistants that are actually bringing something to the table. Therefore, our training requires a great amount of time and energy. And it's hard to afford. It's tough. The cost of the staff is increasing. And if you don't know, the cost of training is incredibly expensive on the practice because it pulls us from what we should be doing to continue our growth. And then to top it off, we're utilizing systems these days that have become increasingly technical. Digital workflows are far greater, and our profession isn't necessarily in the digital workflow era. Obviously, there's things that we can do to make it more so, but we still have two hands that have to be working on that patient in the chair. No longer can we plug and play. We have to spend an amazing amount of time with our new staff if we choose to create amazing systems. Something else that you hear a lot from your orthodontic colleagues is turnover. It feels much more disruptive than it ever did before. I think I oftentimes feel like, we spend an inordinate amount of time training, and then we just get to turn around and watch our new staff leave. They're leaving for more money or other personal needs at that. But in the end, we're still having to turn around and start again. Loyalty is not what it was. Now, even when the practice is fully staffed, things still feel a little bit strained. And I think that this is an important one for us to all recognize. You can have every position within your practice filled and still feel like the practice is running you instead of the other way around. And how can that be? Maybe you're even overstaffed and you still feel the stresses at the end of the day. It's very frustrating. You know, most of us entered into orthodontics expecting complexity in our clinical decision making. We go to school and we train through biology, and then you jump into, mechanics. And in the end, this is what we were taught to expect. What we didn't expect and spent very little time of in school is the part of practice ownership that would be managing people or designing workflows or just constantly needing to adjust how our businesses operate. As alluded to earlier, this industry is rapidly changing. As doctors, we have to stay up to date. We have to continue learning, and we have to perfect our craft, whether this be wires and brackets and better bracket positioning or new digital workflows. There's a lot of things that we have to learn to stay the best. Our continuing educations are supposed to get us there. But the fact is, it's very difficult to learn ourselves and become proficient enough in new things to turn around and train others. And especially when what we learn today may not hold true tomorrow as far as how that new technique is working. Again, rapid change brings about difficulty in training. Today, these operational challenges often determine whether practice even feels sustainable. We all kind of go back to the same old narrative. We've all heard it. We probably all said it. And honestly, we all feel it. People don't want to work anymore. This is something that we say. Or, you know what? Good staff, they're impossible to find. Or my favorite, which I feel often, is this generation is just different. This generation, they don't want to work. And I'll admit, these thoughts creep into me more often than they should. It's this day, it's a Thursday afternoon or a Thursday morning, and your third staff member of the week, they call in sick or absent or who knows what's going on. And you just feel like, how am I ever supposed to advance? How am I ever supposed to move forward? And it's really easy to feel this way with the pressures that we feel and the busyness of our practices. Consider these following statistics. 90% of dental professionals report extremely challenging recruiting out there. It's just a very hard thing to find. We're almost always in a recruiting phenomenon. 70% of our dental professionals struggle just to find clinical assistance. The vast majority of our issues happen in the back, in finding, but that's not where all the problems lie. That's just what we, the doctors, feel because that's where we spend all of our time. 60% say that shortages and retention is the top challenge they have in practice altogether. It has nothing to do with their trade. It has everything to do with personnel. Practices that report to the AAO, 10% of staff left the field in their 2024 data alone. Think about that. 10% left the field in 2024. That is a large number to be losing in every practice. The truth is, if we step back and we just look at the big picture, something will become very clear. Every industry is facing staffing pressure. Now, that's not an excuse to say that it's nothing that we need to be considerate of, but it does make it so that we don't feel alone. Healthcare in general has a tremendous amount of staffing pressures and turnovers. Hospitality. Use your own experience at the last restaurant you went to. How many of us make the comment that they appear understaffed tonight? Or it's a restaurant with 100 tables and 50 of them are full, and yet there's people waiting. They just don't have people. Retail is the same. You'll see the same in technology. So this isn't unique to orthodontics. It's dentistry as a whole. And this isn't primarily a people problem. This is a systems problem. And this is the thing that we need to understand. You have to acknowledge what the true problem is in order to get a true solution. And we have a systems problem in most of our practices. The solution is about how work is structured, how roles are defined, and whether the practice is designed to support those people working in it. This all comes back to us as the leaders of the practice and the doctors. Now, orthodontic practices are particularly vulnerable to what I like to refer to as a legacy design. How things have been in history. If it's not broke, don't fix it. This kind of mantra. Many of our operational systems were created in a completely different environment. But status quo is comfortable. If you look back and you think, for those of us that are old, what did a practice look like 20 years ago, 30 years ago? We can even say with how fast that technology is advancing, what did our practice look like 10 years ago? Team members stayed on for decades, right? And I think most of our practices may have one or two team members that have been around since the inception of the practice or for 10 years or more. But team members don't do that much anymore. The new hires, they don't last a really long time. As a matter of fact, about 10 years ago, the average number of staff per doctor in the field of orthodontics was almost 7, 6.9, so just approaching 7. Today, that same survey being done, the average doctor has 6.2 staff per doctor. Yet, production during that time has increased greatly. And this shows that we are getting busier and busier. Yet, we've experienced over a 10% decrease in staffing during that time. Furthermore, technology was a lot simpler, or in some cases, depending on the practice, maybe even non-existent. And today, technology, not only is it more complicated, but it's so rapidly changing, it's a job to stay on top of it. Furthermore, regulatory demands. 20 years ago, regulatory demands were a lot lower. We all know that regulation just gets deeper. They never take some regulation away. It's continued to be added. So we have to keep up with that. Also, doctors personally handled far more decisions within the practice. Those systems worked then because at that time, the environment supported them. Today's environment is not the same. It is wholly different. Many practices are still operating under assumptions that really no longer hold true. So I'd like to kind of walk through a couple of these ill-conceived assumptions that we make. We assume, and we all are guilty, I believe, that one person can cover multiple unrelated roles. They're good. They're fantastic. They have a great acumen. I can give them this and this and this. Or we assume that training happens naturally by observation. So we hire someone new, they're a clinical assistant, let's say, we sit them in the chair, we have one of our other clinical assistants kind of watching over them, and we assume that via osmosis or something like this, that they are going to naturally fit into the practice, perform things the way that we perform them, and become this amazing team member. We also assume that knowledge can live inside of someone's head. So we don't have written protocols. We just talk and we teach and we feel that we had a great day, but how much of that data actually stays with that team member? Lastly, and a huge problem is we assume that the doctor themselves should be the final decision maker for most everything. The buck stops here, run everything through me. Those assumptions may have worked in smaller, slower practices, but modern orthodontics doesn't allow for it. Those thought processes create stress points everywhere. When you have systems, and I say systems loosely, when we have systems that are unclear, things fall through the cracks. Let's give some examples here. Like, who's ever lost somebody who does AR collections for you? And you don't realize what's happened until all of a sudden cash collections are down and you bring somebody on new and then you find out, oh my gosh, look what's happened over the past few months. Ordering becomes reactionary. You don't order something until you're out of it. So the day you need it, you're like, well, we need to order this now. Reminder calls, they don't get made. Therefore, you start seeing holes in your calendar and you don't understand why, because you have the patients, but they're not coming to their appointment. It's something as simple as not making a phone call. Or pending treatment goes unchecked. You have a patient, they needed to go home and talk to mom or dad. It's our job to reach back out to them, and we don't, because these are things that we assume are being handled. Accountability becomes really fuzzy. And how can you be accountable when you have nothing written, no protocols, nothing, no guides to follow? In the end, our teams end up improvising. And we know that improvisation is exhausting. Constantly improvising, constantly making things up on the fly. It's exhausting for both us and certainly for our staff. You can take two practices that have the same number of patients, the same number of staff, even located in the same general area, but those practices could feel completely different. One of them can feel calm, collected, smooth, an amazing experience for the patient, which therefore also is an amazing experience for both the doctor and the team. The other practice, all in all, looks the same, but it just feels chaotic. There's no systems, there's no accountability. Everyone's kind of running to the beat of their own drum, and we wonder why we can't get caught up. We wonder why our reviews aren't great. The difference between these two just generally is not effort. Everyone's trying hard. The doctor's trying, the team is trying. This all falls back on the fact that we have a design problem. We have to spend the time up front. When you have a design problem, a redesign is what is called for. We need to move from job titles to job functions. One of the most important shifts we make in our practice, was separating our people from our functions. The old way, or the way that we used to do it, was we designed our offices by a job title. Think about, you have we kind of have two main buckets. We have our front office and we have our back office or our clinic. And in the front office, we further divide into a front desk or maybe a treatment coordinator who kind of falls in between the two. We have an office manager. In the back, we have our clinical assistants, maybe a sterilization tech, maybe a lab tech. But those titles actually hide the complexity of what each of those individuals is doing and should be doing. Inside every title is a multitude of responsibilities, and I'll give you a couple of examples. Let's talk about the front desk. The front desk may handle the new patient phone call. They may handle scheduling. They may handle patient communication, both via phone and in person. They may need to handle financial questions, insurance verification, follow-ups, data entry. How disassociated were each of those things, from scheduling to a financial question, from patient communication to insurance verification? Those things are drastically different from one another. That is not one job. Yes, we call that front desk. It's a multitude of functions, different functions, and each function really should be treated independently. When one person is responsible for too many unrelated functions, very predictable things happen. So let me say that again. When one person is responsible for too many unrelated functions, very predictable things happen. it is predictable that things are going to slip. It's predictable that accountability is very unclear. It's predictable that stress, which is not only the patient stress, the doctor stress, and the employee stress, but probably follows us all home. Eventually, you're going to have burnout. We're going to lose people. If we don't have loyalty, all it takes is a bad day or two, and burnout equates to the loss of a team member. And we got to remember, this is not because the person that's burning out isn't capable. We assume that they're capable. We vetted them, we hired them, we liked them, and then we put them into a blender. The truth is, it's the role itself. It's just poorly defined. If we define those roles, we don't have nearly the trauma or the headache. Now, let's use another example. Let's talk about our treatment coordinator. I think that this is a great example that we look at because I think we're all mostly guilty of this. And as it turns out, this position, while I believe every position holds its place and each is equally as important, the treatment coordinator just so happens to be outside of the phone call, the person who spends the majority of time with our patients in the early days of them coming into our practice. And we expect our treatment coordinators to present treatment, explain financing. And they have to explain financing from the options to payment methods, try to fit their budget all the time, all the while molding into insurance into the middle of that, which is very confusing to our patients. And so we answer a multitude of insurance questions, and then we help the treatment coordinator then helps schedule that patient for their future treatment. Now, let's say that that patient didn't stay and they leave. Now we have a whole separate job, which is to follow up on unscheduled treatment or pending patients. Maybe putting them into the recall pool and just making sure they go to the right spot. And it's very difficult if you think about it. How do you follow up on unscheduled treatment and make these kind of phone calls while from 8 to 5, you're supposed to be in front of a new patient trying to explain their treatment, explain their financing options so that they can get started with the treatment. Remember, they came to us for a reason. There's something they want to see improved. And our job is to tell them what we can do and to make that happen for them if that's a possibility. You put all that together for a treatment coordinator, and again, that is not one job. That is a bundle of jobs, all put together and on one person. Now then, conversions drop or our follow-ups slip. It's our instinct to say our treatment coordinator just needs to be more organized, or what are they doing in there? How are we letting people slip? What happened to our recall pool? The real issue, though, is the role itself. In our practice, we made strides to separate those functions. Case presentation, insurance follow-up, some of these things need to be automated. If we can pull some of this stuff off of the back of our treatment coordinator, our clinical assistant, our front desk, our same team members can become dramatically more effective. Think about that. Same people, but a better system. Therefore, better results. Now, it's also important that we protect the doctor's role. The doctor's bottleneck. It's an important concept that most of us are guilty of. I believe that in a healthy orthodontic practice, our doctor's time should focus on three main things: diagnosis and treatment planning, clinical execution of that plan, and all of these things, both of these things fit under the leadership and vision that we, the doctor, should have. And if you can't clearly define, first of all, that vision and be the leader, it's very hard for anything to flow under. But after we do that, we went to school to train on proper diagnosis and treatment planning and clinical execution so that we spend our time treating our patient. However, we spend a surprising amount of time doing things that we're not trained to do. Fixing scheduling issues is one of my favorites, or the answering of routine staff questions. These are what we refer to as got-a-minute meetings. When someone walks up to you in the practice, hey, Dr. Smith, got a minute? First of all, it's never a minute. Second of all, you have no idea what you're stepping into. And once you start, it's very hard to stop. And so we have to have rules about how not to have those meetings. We're concentrating on our patients during the day. Lastly, and I find probably my biggest problem is how many of us have become on-site IT providers? We troubleshoot operational problems all day long. I don't know how many printers I've reconnected. I don't know how many times our phone system's gone down and I've been responsible for getting it back up, or computers have gone down. Or one of my favorites is the x-ray machine's not working, or there's not a link between the x-ray machine and the computer. And we, the doctor, are taken from what we're doing to spend our time there. And the truth is, we have unclear systems that would show how those conflicts could be resolved. An operation that says this is how you reconnect a printer that everyone can reference would be a great idea. When we evaluated our own operations, I really had to ask myself two uncomfortable questions. What is it that I'm doing that someone else could do with a clear system? If I had a clear system defined, what do I do that someone else could easily do that it doesn't require me to do? And then what else is it that I am doing that only I should be doing? And I think what you can see there is the second question is where we should be. If there's things that only you can do, that's where we, the doctor, should spend our time. Diagnosis, treatment planning, and enacting our clinical plan, creating a vision. Those are things that only you can do. And that's where your time should be spent, not in connecting a printer. Now, once we redesigned, I should say, our workflows, utilizing this idea, things changed quickly for our practice. We were able to clinically focus, and there was a drastic improvement in our clinical outcomes. Our team confidence also increased. When we hire people, they don't want to come on without any personal growth. Our team, and that's something that we ask them in the interview, are you willing, able, desire? Do you have growth in mind? And they all have personal growth in mind. No one ever says no. So their confidence greatly increases because now they're in charge of something. And I can explain at the end of this, we'll talk about some of the personal things that we have done in our practice to create this confidence. And we can walk through some of those. In the end, our entire organization became more stable. Job satisfaction was a lot better. When everything runs through you, the doctor, we know one thing: nothing will run efficiently. Give your team responsibility, but to do it, you have to give them clearly defined jobs. Now, systems really do reduce chaos, as we've discussed. So we need to build systems that support our teams. Many orthodontic practices rely far more on memory than they realize. I bet you, I'd love to know how many feel that they hear these phrases being stated within their office I'd say on the daily. When someone asks a question and their response is just ask her. Or, you know what, that's not how we usually do it. Or it depends. These are things that show that you have an undocumented system, as opposed to being able to reference the document, the system. When systems live inside people's heads, that system and therefore the practice becomes very fragile. It doesn't take much to break it. Training becomes ultimately difficult because it's unlikely that we teach one person one thing and the second person the exact same thing. It's very likely that there's a different take. Not to mention, written protocols, etc., are something that people can take home with them and actually study. Well, in the end, what happens is we get turnover, and that turnover becomes incredibly disruptive. And furthermore, and we got to remember that we're working with people here, mistakes become much more common when we don't have a documented system. Documented systems doesn't mean that once you create your system that it stays that way. The systems can be changed, but they can be changed in a controlled environment where everyone gets the same message, not necessarily just the person that experienced you that day. So when a system is documented and it's clear, something very powerful happens. Training becomes much faster. It's much easier to train a new hire. Expectations become more clear. Team member accountability becomes possible. And actually, you weed out those that don't fit. And that's okay because you're going to find out one way or another. Be better to find out in the early stages than after days, weeks, months of training and then have that team member not fit. In the end, our teams will gain confidence. They'll know what success looks like and they'll feel success. They will take responsibility because they have responsibilities, because we've defined their role and given them a playbook to look at. For example, when we begin documenting processes like how a new patient moves from phone call to consult, that's a document. Or how a new patient walks in the door and how from the moment they walk in to what it looks like when they walk out. Or how insurance is verified and how insurance is tracked. How aligner cases are monitored. And this is important. We have multi-location practice. Got to make sure that when a patient comes to get their aligner case, that it's in the office they're supposed to be in. Did it get shipped correctly? Did we carry it from one office to another? What happened there? But when you have it documented, those mistakes become few and far between. An important day in the patient's life is the day their braces are removed. Are we prepared for them? Does the patient know? Do they have clear expectations? In our office, we use a lot of removable retainers. We print in the office and create clear Essex style retainers. Well, does that patient recognize that they come in the morning and they're going to need to come back to pick up the retainer, or they're going to have to wait for a period of time for that process to happen? Without clear processes, that patient gets debonded on a Thursday afternoon and we don't have time to make it, and we're not coming back to the office, let's say, until Monday. How easily that could have been solved if everyone was on the exact same page with written processes. None of these things are glamorous tasks, I'll say that, but they're all necessary tasks, and they're the backbone of having a stable practice. Now, we talk about outsourcing and scaling, because to build, we have to challenge this assumption that we all have at some point in time in our careers. Everything we do belongs within our office. And I'm not sure where that assumption came from, but it was something that I had as well. The reality is that orthodontic functions don't always require a physical presence. Of course, putting on braces and wires and clinical treatment, we have to have a physical presence. X-rays, physical presence. How about insurance verification? Do we need to do that in our four walls? How about call handling? Can we outsource that? What about after-hour scheduling? I know we all believe that our team is the only one that can answer the phone correctly, but that's not true. We can expand our hours by utilizing outside sources. We can enhance our marketing by using outside sources. We can do the same with HR administration. All of those things can be done remotely. And outsourcing those kind of functions is not about lowering your quality. It's not about being lazy. It's actually about protecting focus. It's about protecting the thing that we are there to do. We already talked about we, the doctors, we create this vision, we diagnose and we treatment plan, and we also get our clinical results. To keep our focus protected, to live our vision, sometimes it's best to outsource. You don't have to outsource everything, but you can outsource some things. It's something to consider at least. There is a critical rule when it comes to outsourcing, though. You cannot outsource chaos. If you have an unclear system, let's say from the phone call, if you have a defined path that you like for whoever answers that phone to walk through, scripting of sorts. If you don't have those kind of systems, outsourcing is only going to amplify your problem because you're adding more chaos into the mix, actually. But if you clearly define your systems, you can outsource them and make things much better for you internally. When workflows are clear and they're measurable, outsourcing can become one of the greatest devices of leverage that you have within your practice. And that leverage is actually what allows a practice to scale. Leverage resources that are out there for us. They're not personnel dependent. And there's times and places where it makes sense to do it. Let's see here. Let's see here. I want to leave you with 3 ideas. So I have a slide out of order there. These ideas are first and foremost, most staffing problems are actually a design problem. And I think it's important to consider that. The good news is, again, there's something that we can do about it. We can change that design. Secondly, a mission-aligned team is built through clarity and through systems. It's not just hiring. Bringing more people in does not help to create your vision and to follow the mission you set. But rather, if you have systems that are clear, anyone who knows that system can follow that mission. And lastly, the most successful practices don't necessarily work harder. They actually just work more intentionally. If your practice, feels really heavy right now, that doesn't necessarily mean that something is wrong. Often it simply means that the systems that once worked for us, they actually no longer match our environment. And just keep in mind, growth will always require a redesign. So with that, I'll stop kind of on this portion. Marla had asked me to do some other, so I'm going to quit sharing my screen and I'm going to turn this back over to Marla. So thank you again for your joining, and let me turn this back to Marla.
Awesome. Love, love, love hearing all of your recommendations and fabulous insights for the practices that are joining us. Thanks so much for those great ideas. I'm excited now, though, to dive in a little deeper and show the proof points for the systems that you have implemented. So I know that you mentioned that you don't mind me sharing some of your practice data. So thank you so much for allowing us to do that and to talk a little bit more about the specifics of your journey. You've mentioned to me a few times, as we've kind of been preparing for this webinar, that OrthoFi was your primary growth strategy for the first couple years, once you and your partner decided you were going all in. And I just love this story, and I'm amazed by the numbers and the success that the story brought you. So can you tell our listeners, kind of relay that whole thing to them because I just love it. And talk to us about your first few years with OrthoFi as well.
Sure. So, my partner, actually, his wife brought to us this story about an oil company, and the oil company had decided that they were going to create a very aggressive bonus system to fully involve their team. And this would be for each and every member of the company, no matter whether it was their top salesperson or someone in the janitorial portion of their company. It did not matter who it was. Everyone was involved, and everyone was involved equally. And their goal was in a 5-year period of time for a very large company was to double their company. And we spent a lot of time thinking this through, and we decided we were going to do the exact same thing. So we created a goal of doubling our practice, both production and collections, in 5 years. The truth is, that's a really aggressive goal, which I always like to set, but I'm also a firm believer that let's say that we got 75% to our goal and we didn't actually double the practice. What a win that would be too. But we always want to win and we always want to hit our goals. So in order to accomplish something like this, we had to first validate that we had the right team, that we had the ability and desire, that the team had the ability and desire to learn more, that alignment was that they weren't comfortable with where they were, because what we were going to do was going to make them uncomfortable. We needed teammates that really wanted personal growth, because that's what this all stems back, right? They come to our offices for personal growth. Anyway, in order to do this, we had to have a plan. Top of our list was enlist OrthoFi. Other things we wanted to do were in-network insurance, ask for referrals, ancillary offerings. And what we did is we tapered this out so they would go year after year after year. And in the end, there was a very large financial reward for our team. And it was fun. And what they got was little pieces along the way. So the way that we got our team involved and to take on specific tasks was they were bonused, moderately for individual things that they could actually affect. But after a year, some of those individual things would change. In the end, by implementing OrthoFi as our first year, which is a bit of a change compared to how we did it, but we were able to utilize our staff for other things because OrthoFi took such great care of what it is OrthoFi does, from insurance and helping with the financial presentation. Our first year, we had a 24% production growth by doing nothing more than changing that. The second year, we added in some in-network insurance, but our production growth in year 2 was another 22% on top of the first year's 24%. And we went on through our 5 years. The other thing that was very helpful that I found with OrthoFi was there was a lot of KPIs that we weren't tracking, and kept new patient exam. Never even thought that one. Same day smile percentage, sales of ancillary items, or treatment recommended conversion from 45 days all the way out to 365 days. Now we had it so that our staff could be keen on and follow through with a lot of things that helped to grow the practice. So OrthoFi really served as a multifaceted approach. It wasn't so much that it was just a financial presentation and insurance verification, but it gave our team the ability to concentrate on things because we had really good data. I hope that answers the question, Marla.
Again, I just love that story. And then on top of that, the growth numbers are just amazing. So I do want to shift now a little more to current day. So here are some recent stats about your practice. I'm seeing 75% case acceptance, which is great. But one thing that's really fascinating to me is that nearly all of your case acceptance is happening same day. So I would love for you to walk us through how you and your team win the same day start and how OrthoFi's kind of help you achieve such a high same day start rate.
Well, first of all, I think it's important to recognize that same day starts equate to extra jobs for people. So people are coming to work for us and they're paid whether we do the same day start or not. So we incentivize them for the same day, and we've created a same day culture within the office. First of all, it is the answer to what the patient wants. We live in a convenient society. This is what our patient wants. It's actually how you create a really, in my opinion, how you create a really wonderful relationship with your patient, because we present it as we'll do this for you, because we truly don't have a column listed for same day. We put them into the midst of our schedule, and our staff is very motivated to do so because they see the fruits of it as well. So that's now orthofy helps a lot because we walk in generally, we have our insurance verified, we have a great slider that they can use, and financing. We have a great way when, one of the hardest things to overcome is when mom or dad is there and the other is not, and they say, well, I have to talk to my spouse. Well, it's really easy to talk to your spouse because the spouse can look at the same dashboard that they're looking at and help make that decision, which is vital and helps us to get the job done. Um, it's also incredibly efficient because it doesn't require more staff. Booking them out fills your schedule up. If we can fit them in that day, we do, and our staff loves it. Like I said, they get personal growth out of it, and so it's a great story. And without orthofy, we wouldn't be able to do it. The financial presentation would take way too long. I don't think that the patient would have a handle on it. And plus, with orthofy, we don't have to have a single financing method. It makes it a lot easier to have a multitude where you can fit everybody's budget and things. It's very hard to do that when you're doing it with Excel or a piece of paper in front of you.
Yes, I think that's a piece that, a lot of practices when they're just beginning to look at orthofy, they see us as, oh, we're going to help us with insurance verification. But, orthofy's mission from day one has been to start more smiles, and that truly is our goal. And that happens if you're getting it same day so much easier. So I love that you've been able to focus on that, and we've been helpful in achieving that. So Orthofy has helped you with a lot of growth in the earlier years, but it's unrealistic to think that a practice will continue to see double-digit growth once they've fully matured. Orthofy is aware of this, and we're continually looking for ways to help our practices increase production by introducing new features and educating them on best practices. So that's something we're constantly doing. In 2025, we introduced a new feature, Tina Burns IMAX, that has honestly changed the in-network story for so many practices. As we all know, being in network has its advantages, but it typically comes at the price of lower case fees. And the IMAX solution is flipping the script on this, though. Since Orthofy manages insurance, including filing claims for our practices, we've built in a feature that separates claims into multiple codes when appropriate, allowing practices to realize more revenue from a patient start. Now, specifically for you, Dr. Lustig, this one added feature has allowed you to produce $446 more per in-network start over the last 12 months. And that points to a significant return on investment. So, Dr. Lustig, I would love to hear your thoughts on just the orthofy ROI in general. This is one piece of it, but in general, let's just talk about a little bit about your ROI with orthofy.
Well, if I can for just a second, I'd like to talk a little bit about IMAX because I love this product. First of all, it's a product that would be impossible to bring in-house. It's something that we would have to have a multiple team members dedicated, which you all have a large facility filled with lots of people. That's why this works in great computer systems. But to see a $450 increase, or let's say less of a discount for doing the exact same work that we do each and every day is truly amazing. And we're really thankful. So glad that you all created this. Only regret is that it wasn't here 5 years ago, but I certainly won't complain today. But I will say that our practice was ticking at a 5 year, maybe a 5%, 6% growth per year prior to implementing orthofy. So if you look at the ROI, well, 24% and then 22%. I mean, we'll never be able to catch up to the return on investment. The numbers that we can't discuss because there is no metric to be able to, but I recognize is staffing. I don't have a practice our size would have to have a multitude, maybe 4, 5, 6 more staff members to accomplish all that we get by using OrthoFi. So not only are we able to boost our production, but our number one overhead item, which is staffing, is decreased because or stays level while we continue to grow because so much stuff can be outsourced to OrthoFi. And for this reason, that's the reason that we're so happy with the implementation.
Great, great, great. Okay, so much that you've covered here, and I really appreciate that. I want to thank you, Dr. Lustig, for joining us. This has been some excellent content, some great ideas. We are offering CE credit for tonight's webinar, and I will share that code in a minute. But before I do that, I want to talk to our audience, those of you've joined us, about an OrthoFi offer that you don't want to miss. As Dr. Lustig mentioned earlier, OrthoFi can definitely help with case acceptance, but we're also instrumental in providing key operational efficiencies via our insurance management while delivering industry-leading AR performance and actionable data to help every OrthoFi practice succeed. The OrthoFi family of growing practices currently includes over 2,900 locations, and we've helped these practices start over 5.5 million starts, generating over 34 billion in production. And we would love your practice to join that family. So, to help you determine if OrthoFi is a good fit for you and your team, we're offering a complimentary Smiles Performance Assessment. We call this the SPA, and here is how that process works. The first step is to do a quick 30-minute discovery call with our team. During that call, we will collect some information about your practice and review the next steps. And then we will schedule our next call. And during that second call, we will share your performance assessment data and provide our recommendations for the solution that best meets your needs. This truly is the best way to see the OrthoFi ROI specific to your situation firsthand. So to schedule that first discovery call, please use the link in this QR code, and we will look forward to spending some time with you then. Now, as promised, here's the link you should use to collect your CE credit for this webinar. And just let us know if you experience any difficulties with this link. And then finally, I just want to show you that OrthoFi will also be at the booth number 2143 at the AAO, and we would love to see you there. So, Dr. Lustig, thank you so much for joining us tonight. You've provided such fantastic information. I hope each attendee will implement at least one of your great ideas. To the audience joining us, thank you for spending this hour with us. We do appreciate your time and hope you'll continue to join us as we deliver additional education for the Business of Orthodontics series throughout this year. Again, Dr. Lustig, thank you so much. And we really appreciate it. This is fantastic. Great, great information.
Thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate everyone for spending your evening with me. Thank you.